From the book Lady Killers, Deadly Women Throughout History by Tori Telfer, I quote, "It's true. Men spill most of the blood in history books. Society tends to sink into collective amnesia about female violence. It's not that society doesn't recognize the existence of evil in women, because women have been portrayed as conniving and malevolent and the bringers of the apocalypse since Eve ate the apple. But we seem to prefer evil women ensconced in our fiction. They might lead men onto the rocks, frame them for murder, or suck out their breath in a poem. It's when they enter real life and start slaying real people that our imaginations balk. We can't imagine that they did it, on purpose. Typically, women are seen as solely capable of reactive homicide, murder done in self-defense, a burst of passion, an imbalance of hormones, a wave of hysteria, and not instrumental homicide, which can be plotted, calculated, and performed in cold blood. What happens when people are confronted with a female killer? When ideas of the weaker sex break down and we're staring into the unnerving eyes of a woman with dried blood under her fingernails. First, we'll probably check to see if she's hot or not. A 2015 study took pains to determine which of the 64 female serial killers they profiled were of, quote, above average attractiveness, end quote. This helps their crimes go down easier. A spoonful of sugar, etc. In general, people take pains to link female killers to lust at every possible turn, even if their crimes have nothing to do with it. A clickbaity 1890 essay titled "The Truth About Female Criminals" lays it out well, caps lock and all. Quote, native or foreign, young or old, handsome or hideous, she plants herself confidently upon the vantage ground of sex. End quote. If the woman in question isn't hot, burn her at the stake. And give her a silly nickname while you're at it, like Giggling Grandma, Hell's Belle, or Arsenic Annie. In 2015, an elderly Russian woman was caught on camera carrying a pot alleged to contain the head of her best friend, and the media promptly christened her Granny Ball Lecter. These are not names calculated to keep us up at night. They're punchlines to the great overarching joke that is female aggression. End quote.
She was angry. Think about when in this culture women are praised for their anger, usually in defense of their children. If they get angry in their own self-defense, think about what we call them. Crazy, hysterical, emotional B-word for 200, Alex.
The stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth.
Mesa, Arizona, June 9th, 2008. After several days of worrying about him, an anxious group of Travis Alexander's close friends decided to meet at his home. A 30-year-old prepaid legal salesman and budding motivational speaker, Travis Alexander had not been in contact with his family or friends for at least 5 days, and had missed important business calls during that time. When the concerned friends arrived at Travis's suburban Mesa home, they were greeted at the door by his roommate. Travis's roommate claimed that he hadn't heard from Travis either, and that Travis's master bedroom door was locked. But he wasn't concerned because Travis was on a trip to Cancun. However, the concerned friends quickly informed the roommate that Travis's trip to Cancun was scheduled for the following week, on June 15th. Now alarmed himself, Travis's roommate invited the group of friends inside and began looking through the drawers in the kitchen to find the spare key to the master bedroom. Upon finding the key, Travis Alexander's roommate and friends unlocked Travis's bedroom door. They pushed it open and were instantly greeted by the smell of death. They stepped inside the bedroom and discovered a grisly scene. Blood covered the walls and floor of the hallway leading to the master bathroom, where the massacred body of Travis Alexander lay crumpled in the shower.
What's going on?
A friend of ours is dead in his bedroom. We hadn't heard from him for a while. We think he's dead. His roommate just went in there and said there's lots of blood. I didn't go in, but I can give you the phone to someone who went in there.
Yes, please, can you?
Hello.
Hi, so what's going on?
He's dead. He's in his bedroom.
Okay.
In the shower.
Okay, how did this happen? Do you have any idea?
No, we have no idea. Everyone's been wondering about him for a few days.
She said that there was blood. So is it coming from his head? Did he cut his head?
It's all over the place.
Is there any weapons around?
No, I don't know. Not that I saw.
How many people are in the house?
How many of us? How many are in the house right now? Just the 5 of us? 5 of us.
Okay, I need all of you outside.
Okay.
Hold on just a moment. Okay, you're a good friend of Travis's, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has he been threatened by anyone recently?
Yes, he has.
Okay.
He has an ex-girlfriend that's been bothering him and following him and slashing tires and things like that.
Travis's friends were quick to point the finger at his 27-year-old ex-lover, Jodi Arias, who they referred to as Travis's dirty little secret.
And do you know the ex-girlfriend's name?
Do you remember? Yeah. What's his ex-girlfriend's name? Ask Taylor.
And do you know if he's ever reported it to the police?
Her name is Jodi. I don't know if he's ever reported. Hold on. Yeah. Ask Taylor if he's ever reported Jodi to the police, like if Travis did. No, he hasn't reported anything about Jodi's behavior.
And everyone is out of the house. There's no one else in the house.
No, no one's in the house.
Okay.
I don't know, because none of us know what's going on.
I need to ask a friend something. I'm giving the phone to me.
Okay.
Taylor.
Hi.
Hi.
I didn't go in, but from what I heard, his roommate went in. There's blood in his bedroom, behind the door, and then he said it's all over. And then they went in the bathroom, and he's in his shower.
Okay.
So she's talking to his friend right now. There's a girl that's been stalking him and things, and he's trying to. He might know some information. I hope my phone doesn't die. I'm on like 1 bar of battery. So.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to keep you on the phone until officers arrive. Either officers or paramedics arrive, okay?
Okay, I think I can hear the sirens now.
Travis's friends believed that Jodi Arias killed Travis, and in the coming months, the evidence collected would appear to support their theory. But the evidence would also suggest that Travis Alexander had more than one dirty secret, and some of them weren't so little. Was Travis's former flame a murderous monster, a misunderstood victim, or both? Hello, listeners, and welcome back for another episode. I'm your host, Jordan Crittenden. Join me as I enter the dark, dark world of Travis Alexander's dirty little secret, Jodi Arias. All right, listeners, welcome back. We finally got here. I finally delivered the Jodi Arias episode. I really do apologize that it had been so long before you got to hear a narrative episode, but here we are. We've got it. We're back together again with a new narrative. And this is going to be a doozy today, really. This one took me a lot longer than I had expected, because there are just so many different rabbit holes to go down. The Jodi Arias case is a very modern true crime case. And what that means is that there's so much access to it. You can go on YouTube and watch the entire trial, pretty much. It's all on there. All of Jodi's testimony, all of the prosecution's takes, all of the defense's takes. I mean, it's all on there. Every witness. You can watch all of Jodi's interrogations with the police. Everything is available online. And so there's a lot to weed through, but I went ahead and did it. And I'm glad I did, because I came out with some takes that I didn't really think I would have had, or at least some takes that I didn't know could come from this story. Maybe this will make sense later after I deliver the episode. But before I get to the episode, I have a couple of shout-outs. Indeed, we have a couple of new patrons here at Dark Dark World Enterprises. And I owe shout-outs to two special patrons, two special individuals, Mel H. and Deidre C. Well, thank you so much, Mel, and thank you so much, Deidre. Your support really means a lot. Welcome aboard, and really, thank you. And if you're listening to this and you would also like to support the show and you have the means to do so, please consider checking us out at patreon.com. There you will find ad-free versions of all of our episodes. You'll get bonus content, including blooper reels, video, bonus episodes, all sorts of different things over there. And I'm considering doing early releases of our episodes for patrons maybe a day or two before they come out here on the main feed. So that's a possibility also. Anyway, go check us out over there if you're interested. And if you're not in a position to support the show monetarily, I totally understand that. There are other ways you can support us too. If you like the show, the simplest way to support us is to tell your friends about it. Share an episode. Send something to your friends and family, an email with a link in it, something like that. And if you want to go a little further, go check us out on YouTube and subscribe to us on there. Even if you don't use YouTube for podcasts or you don't use YouTube at all, go subscribe to Dark Dark World on YouTube. It really helps us out a lot, and it's just a quick, easy way to support the show. And finally, if you happen to listen to Dark Dark World on Apple Podcasts, please consider going on Apple Podcasts or iTunes and leaving us a 5-star review. It helps us out a lot, particularly by helping the show to become more visible to others. And one more thing I want to address before we get into the episode on Jodi Arias, and that is that some of you continue to write in worried that maybe Ed C. is not going to be part of the podcast anymore because he seemingly quit the podcast at the end of our Christmas special on JonBenet Ramsey. Well, that was just an emotional moment for Ed. He has not quit the podcast entirely. We're going to be back together soon, doing some classic Dark Dark Room for you, and I believe we're going to be covering next the curious case of the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, which is a case that a fair amount of you have now requested that we cover. So I believe that will be the next one that we do together, Ed C. and I. So I hope that gives you something to look forward to. Fear not, Ed C. has not gone anywhere. And thank you to all of you who wrote in with nice feedback about our latest episode of Doc Doc World, where Jessica Boom and I covered murder on Middle Beach. We too plan to get together again to do another Doc Doc World episode. So look forward to that as well. Okay, I think that's all the housekeeping I have. You've been waiting long enough for a narrative episode. Let's get to it with episode 26, Jodi, Arias. After Travis Alexander's friends called 911 to report their discovery of Travis's dead body, a crime scene unit and detectives from the Mesa Police Department, along with Maricopa County Sheriff's deputies, converged upon Travis's home. There they discovered the same disturbing scene that had shaken Travis's worried friends to the core. Drops of blood eventually led to pools of blood along the hallway from Travis's master bedroom to Travis's master bathroom. In the bathroom was more blood, though an apparent attempt to clean up some of the blood had likely taken place. Collapsed in the corner of the walk-in shower was the mutilated body of Travis Alexander. He had been stabbed at least 27 times, possibly more. His throat had been slit, nearly from ear to ear, and so deeply that he had almost been decapitated. A Maricopa County medical examiner would later determine that Travis Alexander had been dead for at least 5 days, meaning that he had been killed on or around June 4th, and not on June 9th, when his body had been discovered. Travis's trachea, carotid artery, and jugular vein had all been severed. He had various defensive wounds on his hands and forearms, and he had been shot by a small caliber handgun a single time, just above his eyebrow. While processing the scene, detectives remarked to one another that this was clearly a passionate murder, and that whoever was responsible was likely in a significant rage at the time of the killing. While crime scene investigators continued to process and preserve evidence, homicide detectives began to conduct extensive interviews with Travis's family, friends, and colleagues. Some of these interviews took place immediately, but the process was a long one because Travis Alexander was a busy young man with a large extended family, many friends and colleagues, and a massive social network that stemmed mostly from his involvement in the Mormon Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Over the next several weeks, detectives met with and interviewed dozens of people in Travis's various social circles. One particular lead that detectives couldn't ignore was the very first lead they were given. The 911 dispatcher who took the initial call from Travis's friends after they made their unfortunate and gruesome discovery immediately told detectives that the callers had named Travis's ex-girlfriend, Jodi Arias, as a possible suspect due to suspicious past behaviors, including showing up uninvited to Travis's house at strange hours, following Travis, accosting his friends, and possibly even vandalizing his home and his vehicle. Some of Travis's friends had contacted police and explained that they thought for sure that Jodi was the murderer, and that Jodi had made things very uncomfortable for Travis's family and friends by showing up at Travis's memorial service. Quick sidebar here. How brazen is that? Showing up at the memorial service and seeing all the family and friends who you know believe that you are the murderer. That is some serious courage. Or maybe it was just something she thought she had to do to appear innocent. Either way, it's impressive. I mean, I generally don't want to see the family and friends of a person I've hurt in a breakup, let alone a person I've murdered. Not that I've murdered anyone, but imagine seeing these people at the very place where they're gathered to grieve his death, and oh, by the way, they think you're responsible for that death. And you're there by choice. Okay, back to the story, sorry. Jodi Arias was now living in Northern California, and before Mesa Police Department homicide detective Esteban Flores could reach out to her for an interview. He received a message that she had called for him while he was out working the case. Naturally, Detective Flores returned Jodi's call.
Jodi, Arias. Case number 2008-1610804.
Hello,
Hello, can you speak to Jodi, please?
this is Jodi.
Hey, Jodi, this is Detective Steve Flores with Mesa, Arizona Police Department.
Oh, hey, how are you?
Good. I just got a message from one of my patrol officers that you needed to talk to me about something.
Well, I just wanted to offer any assistance that I might have. I was a really good friend of Travis's, and I just, I know that I don't know a lot of anything, but
What have you heard so far?
I heard that he passed away, and that it was, I don't know. I've heard all kinds of rumors. I heard there was a lot of blood. I heard that his roommate found him, or his friend found him, or people were. I'm sorry. I'm upset, but I've heard that nobody's been able to get a hold of him for almost a week, and that was about the last time I spoke to him too. Which is actually why I thought my friend said I should call you anyway and let you know the last time I talked to him.
Yeah, absolutely. So. I mean, any help we can get from anybody who had any kind of contact with him, any phone contact.
I used to talk to him quite regularly. I used to live there. I live in Northern California now.
Jodi Arias appeared to have a solid alibi. Not only did she claim not to have seen Travis since April of 2008, she was now living in California and had been on a road trip to Utah during the week when Travis was killed. Meanwhile, Maricopa County Sheriff's deputies had come across some explosive new evidence that they were eager to share with Detective Flores and Mesa PD. On the night Travis Alexander's body was found, the crime scene unit processing the house for evidence made an interesting discovery. Inside the washing machine, along with a load of recently washed and still damp laundry, was an almost brand new digital camera. Travis's roommates identified the camera and stated that Travis had purchased it recently. Investigators considered the possibility that whoever had killed Travis may have attempted to destroy the camera in order to eliminate potentially incriminating evidence. Though it was likely that the camera and its contents had been destroyed during the wash cycle, investigators had decided to process it anyway. Now, sheriff's deputies were pleased to inform Detective Flores that they had been able to recover deleted images from the camera's memory card. Most of the images showed both Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias in the nude, posing suggestively for the camera. The images were also time-stamped, with most of the pictures having been taken at approximately 1:40 p.m. on June 4th, 2008, just hours before the estimated time of Travis's death. One of the last digital photographs recovered from the camera's SD card was taken at around 5:30 p.m. on June 4th and showed a still living Travis Alexander washing himself in the very shower where his dead body would be discovered days later. And the final photographs pulled from the memory card, likely taken accidentally when the camera had been dropped, showed a man, believed to be Travis Alexander, bleeding profusely on the bathroom floor, with the foot and leg of another person standing over him or beside him. Investigators had also received the results of DNA testing that had been done on a bloody palm print found on one of the bathroom walls. The palm print contained DNA and prints from both Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias. The evidence was enough for investigators to take the next step. On July 9th, 2008, Jodi Arias was indicted by a grand jury in Maricopa County, Arizona, for the first-degree murder of Travis Alexander. She was arrested 6 days later at a home in Yreka, California, where she lived with her grandparents. In cooperation with the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Office in Northern California, Detective Esteban Flores of the Mesa Police Department traveled to Wairika, where he would sit down with Jodi Arias in an attempt to learn the truth. Travis Victor Alexander was born in Riverside, California in 1977. One of 8 children, Travis was raised primarily by his paternal grandparents, who took him in at the age of 11 due to the struggles his parents were having with drugs and alcohol. He lived a mostly straight-laced life and was very active in the Mormon church, especially when he reached adulthood. A charismatic salesman for a company called Prepaid Legal, Travis Alexander was quickly flagged by upper management as an ideal candidate for giving recruitment speeches. Management's hunch paid off, as Travis took to giving speeches and recruited many young people for the Prepaid Legal sales team. Eventually, Travis parlayed his public speaking skills with his Mormon values and started giving passionate motivational speeches at both the church and at business conferences across the country and even abroad. In his late 20s, Travis settled in Mesa, Arizona, a city with a large Mormon population, and purchased a nice 2-story home in a suburban neighborhood. Pleased with the success he was having in life, Travis felt that the only thing missing for him was a wife. Travis was adamant about remaining celibate until he was married. At least, this was the Mormon ideal he wanted to uphold, and the impression he gave to his peers, whether it was true or not. He wanted to meet a proper young Mormon woman that he would marry and start a family with. Nearing the age of 30, Travis was viewed by most of his Mormon peers as being behind in the marriage game. Most of the men and women in his church group were married well before 30, and this was a subject of some insecurity for Travis. He had dated many women within his church. After all, he was seen as quite the catch, with strong Mormon values, a successful career, a house, and an ability to captivate audiences with his speeches, but wasn't able to make any lasting connections with the women he dated. In September of 2006, at a prepaid legal conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, Travis met a young woman whom he would describe as a, quote, vibrant and beautiful blonde, end quote. This vibrant and beautiful blonde was Jodi Ann Arias. Jodi, too, was born in California, at a hospital in Salinas in 1980. To a family of Mexican, German, and English ancestry. Jodi grew up with 3 biological siblings and 1 step-sibling, for a total of 5 children in the house with her parents. Jodi was a loner, a quiet child who often played by herself, as opposed to with her siblings or friends. She was an introvert, and began what her parents describe as a, quote, rebellious phase in her early teens, end quote. At the age of 14, Jodi was caught growing marijuana plants in her parents' Tupperware bowls on the roof of their house. When her parents confronted her about the plants, Jodi offered up no answers, and her parents claimed that this event marked the beginning of a campaign of distancing that Jodi ran against her parents for the rest of her life. She kept secrets from them. She snuck around. She told lies and argued with them constantly, insisting that they were overbearing and intrusive, while her parents insisted that it was she who was simply too reclusive and suspicious for their liking. Jodi dropped out of high school in the 11th grade and began living with her then boyfriend. Indeed, while Jodi was known to not have many friends, if she had any at all, she did always seem to have a boyfriend. Throughout her teenage years, Jodi was always with another boy, usually an older boy, and when one relationship would end, she would seemingly instantly be in another one. Uninterested in school to the point of dropping out early, Jodi Arias focused on work. She worked several jobs in her life, and in her late 20s she took a job with a company called Prepaid Legal. The company offered to send her on a weekend business retreat in Las Vegas, where she would meet company workers from across the country, learn about various aspects of the company, and attend speeches and events as well as social functions. Jodi jumped at this opportunity and went to Las Vegas for the retreat. There, she attended an event that featured motivational speaker Travis Alexander. Wooed by his speech, Jodi approached Travis afterwards and introduced herself. The two hit it off right away. 28-year-old Jodi was impressed by Travis's speech and status, and Travis was smitten with the, quote, vibrant and beautiful blonde, end quote. They both would go on to tell others that they felt an instant connection with one another and had a wonderful first night together, lost in flirty conversation. Here's one of our favorite true crimers, Christina Randall.
In chemistry. As a matter of fact, the very next day, Travis was supposed to go to like this super fancy dinner or whatever, and I guess Jodi did not have a dress, so he asked one of his friends to ask his wife if she had an extra dress. So they got Jodi this dress. It fit perfect. She got to dress up and like go to this like ball or this like gala with Travis, who you guys got to understand from her perspective. This is a girl who dropped out in the 11th grade, right? She was rebelling from her parents. She went from relationship to relationship. She goes to this conference and she sees one of the guys who is like the big shot, okay? He is the big shot or one of the big shots at the conference. He has tons of friends. You know, when Travis gets off the stage, everybody's high-fiving him and talking to him, and like he's the guy. And he invites her to like this dinner thing, and she doesn't even have a dress, and he makes it happen. He gets her a dress. He takes her to this fancy thing. She's his date. I mean, she was already hooked from that moment, in my personal opinion. Afterwards, they continued to like text each other and email each other. They talked on the phone every single day. When this was all said and done, there was like 82,000 emails between them two. Like, I'm trying to figure out what in the heck they were talking about, because y'all know I can talk, baby. I can talk. 82,000 though?
While Travis continued to outwardly project the wholesome Mormon image of a celibate man saving himself for marriage, we now know, through some of Travis's closest friends, and through evidence that would later be revealed at the trial for his murder, that Travis was no longer celibate after he met Jodi. Indeed, the couple had a very sexual relationship, with Travis revealing a side of his personality that was entirely unknown to most of the people in his life. Travis was a bit of a freak. He and Jodi had sex constantly. When they couldn't be together, they exchanged erotic messages and pictures, or had phone sex together. Jodi actually recorded some of the phone sex calls, and police would later retrieve some of these steamy messages. It's how we know certain things, like that Travis routinely referred to Jodi as a, quote, three-holed wonder, end quote. It's how we know that when Jodi climaxed during these phone sex sessions, Travis said things like, quote, you sound just like a 12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. It's so hot, end quote. Ugh, I feel gross even quoting that. Despite having broken his Mormon code by maintaining a sexual relationship with Jodi, Travis kept that aspect of their relationship behind closed doors. He knew that if he were going to settle down with Jodi and marry her, then she would need to appear to the people in his life as a chaste and wholesome woman, worthy of Travis's hand in marriage. And what better way to convey that image than to convince Jodi to convert to Mormonism? Travis pitched the idea to Jodi, and Jodi, ever eager to please Travis, jumped at the proposition. She decided to be baptized into the faith, and she wanted Travis to be the one to baptize her. Travis loved that idea, and early on in their relationship, a ceremony was held. Jodi Arias was baptized by Travis Alexander at his Mormon church. The baptism went a long way for Jodi in the eyes of Travis's family and friends. In fact, all of the people in Travis's life seemed not only to approve of Jodi, but to believe that she might actually be the one for Travis, the one that he would finally marry. Jodi was excited about her future with Travis, and everyone around them seemed convinced that they would be happy together. Everyone, that is, except for Travis himself. While it seems clear that Jodi's primary motivation for converting to Mormonism was that she could appear to Travis's family and church as marriage material, and that it would help Travis to see her that way too, Travis actually became less and less enthused about their relationship. He was having trouble committing to Jodi, and told friends that something was just off about the relationship. Some of these friends now speculate that Travis had begun to see his secret sex life with Jodi as somehow damaging to his character and damaging to his life. He felt like a bad Mormon, and he felt Jodi was to blame for this shift in his life's trajectory. It was Jodi. She was making him a bad Mormon. It was her fault that he was no longer a virgin. It was her fault that he had been derailed from the purest possible path to Mormon salvation. Yeah. Says the guy who refers to her as a threefold wonder and gets off on the idea of a 12-year-old orgasming. However, some of Travis's issues with his relationship with Jodi do seem valid. Here's Christina Randall again.
Stringing her along. So finally, in February of 2007, they become a couple. And when they become a couple, honey, Jodi was in hog heaven. She was so flip-flopping happy, but maybe a little bit too happy. She started becoming very, very possessive of Travis. Travis's friends said like she was super insecure. If Travis was standing there talking to somebody, especially if it was a girl, she would come up and just try to get in the middle. Or he got a text message. She was over his shoulder trying to figure out, who it was from. And if they were in a group of people doing like Bible studies and stuff, like she wanted to be like on top of him. Even to the point that some of his friends said that her public displays of affection was quite inappropriate at that time. Like if everybody's sitting around with their kids, like she basically wants to be on top of him. She's trying to let everybody know that she is his woman now. And it was just getting really weird and really awkward. So now his friends that once was basically thinking she was the one for him, they're starting to be alarmed and getting a bit of a weird vibe from her at this point.
Alas, Travis Alexander decided that Jodi Arias was not marriage material, and he broke off the relationship. Sort of. Rather than end the relationship entirely, Travis continued to call upon Jodi for sex. He essentially demoted her. She was no longer his girlfriend. She was just a vibrant and beautiful blonde that he called up late at night when he was feeling horny. And during this time, Travis began to date again. He started dating a young woman from his church, several years younger than Jodi, and her name was Lisa. It was while Travis was dating Lisa that strange things started to happen. Travis's tires were slashed multiple times. Not once, but multiple times. And each time it was all 4 tires, not just 1 or 2. In another instance, Travis's new girlfriend Lisa received a very long anonymous email. Here's an excerpt from that email. Quote, "You are a shameful whore. Your heavenly Father must be deeply ashamed of the whoredoms you've committed with that insidious man. If you let him stay in your bed one more time, or even sleep under the same roof as him, you will be giving the appearance of evil. You are driving away the Holy Ghost, and you are wasting your time. You are also compromising your salvation and breaking your baptismal covenants. Your future, your salvation, and your posterity are resting on your choices and actions. You are a daughter of God, and you have been a shameful example." End quote. Travis, Lisa, and others assumed that the tire slashing and the anonymous email came from Jodi. But Jodi denied having any involvement. However, Travis also caught Jodi sneaking around the perimeter of his house. He found her hiding in some bushes outside of his home, where she was peering in through his window. Another time, Jodi climbed through the dog door at Travis's house and got into bed with him while he was sleeping. Given the other unsettling events taking place at around the same time, this was frightening to Travis. Until, of course, he realized there was a woman in his bed, and he could simply have sex with her instead of getting upset. So really both parties, Travis and Jodi, were very well versed at using sex as a weapon. Travis used sex with Jodi for convenience, and as an outlet for his secret desires that he couldn't extinguish anywhere else. And Jodi used sex with Travis as a way to keep him in her life. While Travis did tell his friends about all of the things Jodi was doing to him, and about all of the things that were happening to him that he suspected she was responsible for, he never took any of his complaints to the police or anyone outside of his circle of friends. Again, Travis probably felt a certain level of comfort about the whole situation simply because he was still sleeping with Jodi. Eventually, this all died down. In April of 2008, Jodi returned to California, where she moved in with her grandparents in Wairika. However, still horny as ever, Travis wasn't satisfied with the sexless dates he was having with Lisa or other girls from church. Perhaps he had a bit of an addiction to the secret sexual relationship that he had with Jodi. So he kept baiting her, kept texting her, and kept setting up phone sex calls. On one occasion, Travis told Jodi that work was sending him on another of his public speaking trips for the company. This particular trip was to Cancun, Mexico, and Travis had been given a +1 for the trip. Naturally, this would have made Jodi jealous, as up until now, she had been Travis's travel companion. Jodi wanted to know who Travis was bringing with him to Cancun, and Travis brushed the question off, not wanting to reveal to Jodi that he was taking a woman from his church with him. Perhaps Jodi found out exactly who Travis was taking with him to Cancun, or perhaps she didn't. Perhaps for Jodi, the mere idea of Travis going on a special trip with anyone at all other than her was enough to send her into a jealous rage. Or perhaps what would happen next had been on Jodi's mind long before she was told about the trip. In any event, Travis Alexander would never make it to Cancun. When Mesa Police Department Homicide Detective Esteban Flores arrived at the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Office, he was informed about a burglary that had taken place in Wairika, California, not long before the murder of Travis Alexander. Initially, Flores was unsure of how this burglary could possibly be of any interest to him, until he learned that the owners of the burgled house were the grandparents of Jodi Arias, the very suspect he had come from Arizona to interrogate. On May 28th of 2008, less than 2 weeks before Travis Alexander was found dead in Mesa, Arizona, Jodi Arias' grandparents' home in Wairika had been burglarized. But after the burglary, the only missing item of any significance was a .25 caliber automatic Colt pistol, which had not yet been recovered. Detective Flores was now all ears. The gunshot wound to Travis Alexander's head had been made by a .25 caliber pistol, and a single .25 caliber shell casing had been found at the scene. While it was too early to know if Jodi Arias had staged a burglary at the home in which she was living in order to procure a firearm to use in a homicide, this new information cast yet another shadow of suspicion over Jodi and could eventually be used to make a case for premeditation. While he was pleased to have this new piece of evidence, Esteban Flores felt that he already had a slam dunk of a case. He had time-stamped photos, taken mere moments before the murder. He had photos of Jodi and Travis together, taken earlier the same day. And he had both Travis's and Jodi's DNA and a bloody palm print found at the scene. Flores had plenty even without the gun. And armed with all of this evidence, he walked into an interrogation room to sit down with the recently arrested Jodi Arias. First, Jodi told Detective Flores that she wasn't even in Arizona at the time of the murder, as she had told him when they spoke over the phone. She was in Utah.
Was it the week of the first week of June? You took a trip to Salt Lake City. Which route did you take from there?
I was supposed to get on the 15 and go all the way up.
Uh-huh.
And I somehow got off the 15.
Where did you end up?
For a while I was lost, and I'm not above sleeping in the car, so I slept for a while.
Okay.
I'm a heavy sleeper and I sleep a lot, so.
But you were on the 15 for a while, and you ended up getting off the 15 somewhere.
Yeah, I looked at a map, but I'm pretty sure I know where I went.
So this trip took you a little over 48 hours then. I have a problem with this trip.
Well, I went first too.
I've gone over this trip over and over in my mind and on paper. And there's still 20 some odd hours. Even if you pulled over to sleep a couple of times.
Oh, did I tell you that I got stranded?
Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned that. If you slept for 10 hours,
I only slept for about
here
8
and
hours.
here, it would still leave 18 some odd hours for something else. Okay. This is what people are focusing on, is this trip that you took. Because they're saying she left, she didn't get to till Thursday. Wednesday? That's when Travis was killed.
I did not go near his house. Aren't there?
I pulled your cell records. Your cell phone was turned off between here and here.
Well, I didn't turn it off physically, but it died.
And then it magically, you found your charger here?
It was packed under the seat of the passenger side. And it was when I was...
When you were lost, you couldn't have maybe pulled over and found it? Or?
Well, I did finally start looking when I was stranded. I wouldn't have pulled over when I was lost.
But I don't think you're being completely honest with me about that trip.
I honestly got lost. It's bad timing.
Were you at Travis's house on Wednesday?
Absolutely not. I was nowhere near Mesa. I was nowhere near Phoenix. I wasn't even close to him.
What if I could show you proof you were there? Will that change your mind?
I wasn't there.
You can be honest with me, Jodi.
I was not at Travis's house. Was not.
You were at Travis's house. You guys had a sexual encounter, which there's pictures. And I know you know there's pictures, because I have them. I will show them to you. Okay? So, what I'm asking you is for you to be honest with me. I know you were there.
Are you sure those pictures aren't from another time?
Positive. Remember I told you about the camera?
Mm-hmm.
The card's intact. Remember I told you that card was destroyed? I didn't want to tell you the truth. And I have pictures of you in Travis's bedroom with Travis, pictures of him, and it's obvious you guys are having sex, taking photos of each other, and they're dated and time-stamped on the day he died.
Are you sure it's me? I mean, that because I was
Jodi,
not there.
It's you. And you know it's you. I know all the details of this case. The only thing I don't know is why. Why did you choose to go visit Travis that day? And why did you do what you did?
I would never
Why,
hurt
Jodi?
Travis.
You did. You hurt him. That's why we're here. That's why I flew up here. Because I needed to talk to you about this. I can just arrest you and throw you in jail, but I want to know why. Why did you do this to him?
I wouldn't hurt Travis. He's done so much for me.
I know you took pictures of him in the shower just before he died.
I don't think he would allow that.
Mm-hmm. And the camera actually took a couple of photos by accident during the time he was being killed.
Really?
Yeah, Jodi, really. You were there. Quit playing this game. It's time for you to just come out and
I didn't
tell
know.
me.
I did not hurt Travis. I wouldn't do that to him. I did not hurt Travis. I have to maintain my innocence. I can't admit to doing something that I haven't done. There's just no
Well, I have more work to do.
Can you give me a rundown of what's going to happen from here when you leave?
Yeah, you're,
Like, just today, for example.
well, you'll probably be taken across the street to the county jail. You'll be processed through there.
At this time, Detective Flores leaves the interrogation room and leaves Jodi to stew with her thoughts. What follows is the interrogation footage that most of the Jodi Arias memes have come from. Jodi displays a bunch of sort of bizarre behavior while she's left to her own devices in the interrogation room. This behavior includes doing handstands, sitting underneath the table, singing, putting her head in strange positions, talking to herself, laughing. Now, since this is an audio podcast, it's going to be hard for you to get the full effect, but I've tried to include some of the more colorful parts of the audio. If you'd like to get a better picture of this whole thing, just go look up the Jodi Arias interrogation footage. Again, as I've mentioned, it's all on YouTube, and you can actually see her do some of this stuff. But hopefully some of the audio here will give you enough of a picture that you don't necessarily need to do that, but I do recommend that you do.
Should have at least done your makeup, Jodi. Gosh. I didn't hear you breathe. I wonder how am I still here, and I can't breathe. I didn't hear you breathe. Goodness.
The next day, back in the interrogation room after a night in jail, Jodi changed her story. She told Detective Flores, along with Siskiyou County Detective Rachel Blaney, that she was in fact with Travis at the time of the murder, but that it was a pair of intruders who were responsible for Travis's death.
This date is July 16th, and my name is Detective Rachel Blaney, and I'm here with Jodi Arias. Is that how you say your last name? Arias. Okay, I'm sorry. This is just formality, and this is, if I have to, write up a report of what we talked about, at least I know word for word, what you said, and there's no mistakes. Mm-hmm. The reason that I wanted to talk with you this morning, there's a couple of reasons, actually. Let me say this. It's obvious to me that, you're not our typical suspect. You know, you come from a good home, a good family. Your parents obviously care about you. That was evident, you know, when they talked to him yesterday. And you're a bright girl. Probably more intelligent than you were letting on yesterday. And there's no question in my mind or any of the other investigators' mind that you were the person that took Travis's life. But what I need to know, or what I'd like to know, and give you the opportunity to do, is determine whether, you know, you're a cold-blooded, cold-hearted murderer who slaughtered this guy, or are you somebody that got caught up in circumstances and things got out of control? When this hits the news, and it will, it'll go to the media, do you want to be portrayed as that cold-blooded, cold-hearted murderer? Because the media loves that. I'm trying to give you a chance to make things right. You know, show the families that you do have some remorse. But when you continue to deny when it's obvious that that's not the case, you appear to be the cold-blooded killer. And things are going to start moving real fast here for you. This is kind of a pause, you know, before things, you know, start getting heavy. This is your opportunity to help yourself out. We don't need you to tell us anything.
Was there anybody else with you besides you and Travis? Are you protecting somebody else?
I'm just trying to think. What happened to me today and from here on out?
You need to start letting me know what happened.
Okay.
You're telling me that some other people were there.
He was kneeling down in the shower. I don't remember him. If this is his shower and the sink is over here, I was like right here taking pictures. And I don't really know what happened after that exactly, except I think he was shot.
Where were you?
If this is his shower, and he's sitting here, I was like, well, if this is his shower, and he's sitting here, I was like right here on my knees, and his bathtub is right here, and I was taking him here, and I was just going through the pictures, and I heard this loud ring. And I don't really remember, except Travis was screaming. I think I got knocked out, but I don't think it was that long. And there were two people there, and
What'd you say?
I remember putting my hand on his back because he was on all four of his knees. I was like, are you okay? What's going on? What's going on? He's like, go get help, go get help. And I said, okay. And I turned around. There were two people there. One was a guy and one was a girl. I couldn't tell that at first, but I could just see one was a girl. And I assumed the other was a guy because their build. And then their voices. Travis was screaming the whole time. He wasn't screaming like a girl. He was just like he was in pain, like he was like shocked, like, oh, you know.
What happened, Jodi? What did you see?
I took out like a little bitch. I ran. He was still like conscious and still alive, and
You just left him there?
No, I ran into the closet and he stopped me and he didn't touch me. He was just held the gun to my head and he was like, you don't go anywhere. And he told the other girl to finish it. I didn't see. He told me to stay there and not to move. He was starting to just get weaker and weaker. And this guy came back in. And she said that they needed to do me too because it was there And he's like, no, that's not why we're here.
So it seemed like they knew him, obviously.
Yeah, but he didn't seem to know them. I mean, he was a little out of it. Plus, they had masks on anyway. But he didn't express any kind of recognition. I was really scared.
Okay.
I was really freaked out of my mind.
Okay. I don't believe you. I came in here hoping that you would tell me the truth. And this is not the truth, Jodi.
This is all I know.
Does not make any sense.
I feel responsible because I feel that I could have done more. I feel that I should have gotten help.
You feel responsible because you did this.
I did not.
Jodi,
kill
you
Travis.
did. You did. And there's nothing you can say that'll change my mind at this point. This is an elaborate story which does not make any sense. I've done this for a long time. And this is the most far-fetched story I've ever heard. And it's not going to help you. There's no reason somebody else would come in and do this to him. There's no motive whatsoever. I haven't found any.
What is my motive?
Jealousy, anger, fear, if you're being alone, angry at him for not keeping you in his life. I don't know. That's why I'm trying to figure it out. There are so many motives with you.
And Jodi's third and final story would be introduced at her trial, where her public defender, Jennifer Wilmot, explained that Jodi had been present for the murder and had committed the murder, but that she had done so in self-defense.
Jodi Arias killed Travis Alexander. There is no question about it. The $1 million question is what would have forced her to do it. Jodi did not always tell the truth about what happened that night. She was scared. Scared about what had happened and scared about what she had done. She had absolutely no experience with police interrogation before. And so when they talked to her, she wasn't always truthful. Her fear and her panic about what had happened led her to tell different stories. Throughout this trial, you will learn more about Jodi Arias. You will find that she is an articulate, bright young woman who's a very talented artist and photographer. And so what would have forced her to have to take Travis's life on that awful day? In order to answer that question, we have to go back to the beginning.
Jodi Arias' defense team made the case that essentially Jodi had killed her abuser, that Travis Alexander controlled Jodi throughout their relationship with physical and emotional abuse, which continued long after they'd broken up, even after Jodi had moved back to California.
Being a Temple member and an executive director of Prepaid Legal, outward appearances would be very important to Travis. And so while he continued this facade of being a good and virginal Mormon man, he was inwardly dealing with his own sexual issues. And in Jodi, he found somebody who was easily manipulated and controlled. Someone who would provide him with that secretive sexual relationship that he needed. Jodi accidentally drops Travis's camera. And as that camera was falling, that was enough for Travis, because he lunged at Jodi in anger, knocking her to the ground in the bathroom where there was a struggle. Jodi's life was in danger. In just a minute from this picture, we go to the next picture, where it's Travis's body. He's clearly injured already, in a minute. Now that very brief moment of time, a minute, is not the result of premeditation. In that 1 minute, had Jodi not been forced to defend herself, none of us would be here. In that 1 minute, had Jodi not chosen to defend herself, she would not be here.
Now, this trial went on for ages. Jodi herself was on the witness stand for 18 days. That's insane. A lot of defense teams don't even put the defendant on the stand, let alone put them on the stand for 18 days. Yikes. Jodi Arias' first-degree murder trial took place in Maricopa County's Superior Court before Judge Sherry Stevens. Opening arguments began on January 2nd, 2013, and in his opening argument, prosecutor Juan Martinez told the jury that he would be seeking the death penalty. Jodi Arias was represented by appointed counsel, L. Kirk Nurmi and Jennifer Wilmot, who, again, argued that Travis Alexander's death was a justifiable homicide committed in self-defense. Later, the prosecution argued that since a .25 caliber round was found near Travis Alexander's body, and that a gun of the same caliber was stolen from Jodi's grandparents' residence in Wairika the week before, she had staged the burglary and used the gun to kill Travis Alexander. Prosecutor Martinez claimed that Jodi had stalked Travis and had slashed his tires twice. In addition, in the final days before his death, Travis had called Jodi a, quote, sociopath and the worst thing that ever happened to me, end quote. Jodi took the stand in her own defense on February 4th, 2013, testifying, as I mentioned earlier, for a total of 18 days. On the first day of her testimony, Jodi told of being violently abused by her parents, beginning when she was approximately 7 years old. On her second day on the stand, she said that her sex life with Travis included oral and anal sex. She said that the anal sex was painful for her the first time they experienced it together, and that while she considered these forms of sex to be real sex, Travis did not, as they were supposedly not against Mormon rules concerning vaginal intercourse.
What happened after the church services?
Are you talking about what happens after the baptism?
Mm-hmm.
We got back to the house. We were in my bedroom, and we were kissing. He bent me over the bed. He was getting on top of me.
What happened?
He lifted up my skirt, and he pulled down my underwear, and he was pressing against me.
And what happened next?
He began to have anal sex with me. And
is this something that you wanted to happen?
Well, I can't say I wanted to, but I didn't stop him.
But how about feeling like you've been raped, but you enjoyed every delightful moment of it? Did you want to feel like you were raped?
No. But
he also says, you'll rejoice in being a whore. That sole purpose in life is to be mine, to have animal sex with, and to please me in any way I desire. Was it your ultimate goal in life to be Mr. Alexander's whore?
No.
Jodi said that they eventually did have vaginal intercourse, but much less often. It was when Jodi was on the stand that the phone sex tapes were played. These tapes became very explosive and helped to fuel the media frenzy surrounding the trial. As is often the case, it was the sexual nature of this case that made it so popular and a nationwide sensation, I guess. In the phone sex tape, Travis said that he wanted to zip tie Jodi to a tree and have anal sex with her while she was dressed as Little Red Riding Hood, which Jodi seemed to respond to enthusiastically. Jodi herself had recorded this phone sex session without Travis's knowledge or consent, apparently hoping to use it to embarrass him at a later date. Jodi also testified that Travis had secretly found young boys and girls sexually attractive, and that she tried to help him with those urges.
Jodi once had walked in on him masturbating to child pornography, something that drew gasps in the gallery.
After you viewed his masturbating to an image of a young child, did you come away with the understanding that Mr. Alexander had a sexual interest in children?
yes,
Did you believe him to have an interest in young boys?
yes.
However, forensic experts testified that an examination of Travis's home computer found no evidence of any pornographic material. Jodi testified that her relationship with Travis became increasingly physically and emotionally abusive. She said that Travis shook her while saying, quote, "I'm fucking sick of you," end quote, then began screaming at her, after which he body slammed her on the floor at the foot of his bed and taunted her, saying, quote, "Don't act like that hurts, bitch," end quote, and then kicked her in the ribs. According to Jodi, the dysfunction of their relationship reached its climax when she killed Travis in self-defense, after he became enraged when she dropped his camera, forcing her to fight for her life.
I grabbed the gun. I ran out of the closet. He was chasing me. I turned around and we were in the middle of the bathroom. I pointed it at him with both of my hands. I thought that would stop him. If someone were pointing a gun at me, I would stop. But he just kept running. He got like a linebacker. He got kind of low and grabbed my waist. But before he did that, as he was lunging at me, the gun went off. I didn't mean to shoot him.
This was the third differing account of Travis's death given by Jodi, which both prosecutors, courtroom observers, and later jurors felt severely damaged her credibility. Rebuttal witnesses from the prosecution included several of Travis's other girlfriends, who stated he never exhibited any problems with anger or violence.
But investigators say there's no question Travis Alexander suffered. The medical examiner says he was stabbed first, then shot, so it may have taken him some time to die. Crime scene photos show his hands bruised and bloodied, which may indicate he struggled to fight off his attacker, who was stabbing him. In court today, under cross-examination, the prosecutor did his best to expose Jodi Arias as a cold-blooded killer and shatter her account of what happened the night Alexander was killed.
Other than you, who would be sure about your statements?
God.
Well, God's not here. We can't subpoena him, right?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Are you sure that we can't? Because it seems like you're leaving the door open for that.
No matter how hard prosecutors come at her, Jodi Arias has stuck to her story.
Starting on March 14th, psychologist Richard Samuels testified for the defense for nearly 6 days. He said that Jodi was likely suffering from an acute stress at the time of the murder, sending her body into a fight-or-flight mode to defend herself, which caused her brain to stop retaining memory. In response to a juror's question asking whether this scenario could occur even if this was a premeditated murder, as the prosecution contended it was, Samuels responded, quote, "Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No." End quote. Samuels also diagnosed Jodi with post-traumatic stress disorder. Beginning on March 26th, Alice Leviathe, a psychotherapist who specializes in domestic violence, testified for the defense that Jodi was a victim of domestic abuse, and that most victims do not tell anyone about the abuse because they feel ashamed and humiliated. The jury posed nearly 160 questions to Leviathe, many of them focusing on Jodi's credibility. For the prosecution, clinical psychologist Janine DeMart testified, stating that she found no evidence that Travis Alexander had abused Jodi, and no evidence of PTSD or amnesia in Jodi. Jodi had claimed on the stand that she had total memory loss for long stretches of time on the night of the murder, and Dr. DeMart said that this was inconsistent with traumatic amnesia associated with PTSD, which manifests as much shorter gaps in memory. Instead, Dr. DeMart said that Jodi suffered from borderline personality disorder, showing signs of immaturity and an unstable sense of identity. People who suffer from such a disorder have a terrified feeling of being abandoned by others, Dr. DeMart explained to the jurors. The final defense witness was psychologist Robert Geffner, who said that DeMart's borderline diagnosis was not appropriate, and that all tests taken by Jodi Arias since her arrest pointed toward an anxiety disorder stemming from trauma. Now, this is the one that I think is most likely. However, I think that it's problematic here. Ed C. and I have talked before about how we mentioned this during our discussion about the staircase with the murder of Kathleen Peterson. We also talked about it when we discussed the West Memphis 3, that at these trials, it really feels like each team is just trying to sell you something. And, each team just brings in experts to back up the narrative that they're presenting. So you have conflicting experts who are both, decorated in their fields, just saying completely opposite things. And, being a juror, you never know who's selling you the right thing, or who's, if they're selling you anything at all, it's probably not good. And that's why this stuff has to be taken with a grain of salt, especially when you're starting to get into the mindset of the person whose life is on the line here. Here's psychologist Dr. Todd Grande.
And this is what I refer to as a dangerous intersection, right? Whenever we see mental health and the law come together, this is an intersection it's just best to avoid it, right? It's just a bad place to be. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM, that contains these mental disorders was written for treatment. It wasn't written to explain why people commit crimes. So this is just, again, a dangerous and kind of messy intersection of mental health and the law.
So yeah, I can see how that's problematic. And if you're the jury, you're sitting here going, well, the defense's psychologists say that there are issues here with Jodi, and the prosecution psychologists say that there aren't. Well, of course they're going to say that, right? I mean, so it's just tough. It's tough to be a juror. But I think the anxiety thing really carries some weight, and I'll get into that a bit more later. On April 24th, 2013, in response to previous testimony given by Jodi Arias about buying a 5-gallon gas can from a Walmart store in Salinas on June 3rd, 2008, that she returned on the same day, the prosecution called Amanda Webb, an employee from the only Walmart in Salinas, to the stand. Webb testified that according to Walmart's records, no one returned a 5-gallon gas can on that date, and that Arias returned the gas can a week later, rather than on June 3rd. The gas can evidence was seen as important in establishing premeditation, as the prosecution argued that Jodi was trying to avoid being recorded on gas station security cameras as she drove to Mesa. So the idea here being that if she fills up gas in these cans, then she's not stopping to get gas throughout her trip, right? She has gas with her, so she never needs to stop and leave a paper trail or be seen by security cameras at gas stations. Now, I know we've talked about this road trip being Jodi's alibi for a while, and now here it is coming up again during the trial because it's being used to prove premeditation or not. So here's a little timeline breakdown for you. This was important at trial, and I think this will help give you a clearer picture.
Between June 2nd and June 7th, 2008, Jodi Arias took a nearly 3,000-mile road trip, and prosecutors say the evidence from that journey shows that Arias set out to kill Travis Alexander. Now here's a closer look at the hours before and after the death of Travis Alexander. June 2nd, between 1 a.m. and 4:05 a.m., 7 calls between Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander. The longest call was 41 minutes, the shortest just 17 seconds. 8:04 a.m., Jodi rents a car in Redding, California, about 100 miles from her home in Wairika. The rental agent says a blonde-haired Jodi Arias asked for a white car so it wouldn't stand out. 7:32 p.m. After 2 more calls from Jodi to Travis, she stops at a McDonald's in Lodi, California, orders fries and a bottle of water. Arias says she spent the night with friends in Monterey. She's now traveled about 400 miles. June 3rd, 10:10 a.m., Arias makes 3 deposits to different bank accounts in Monterey. Between noon and 2 o'clock, she makes 2 quick calls to Alexander. Sometime during the day, Arias stops at her boyfriend's house in Monterey. Daryl Brewer testified that he gave her 2 gas cans because she said she needed them for a long trip. Between 8 and 9 p.m., Pasadena, California, Arias calls Alexander twice and makes 2 gas purchases at an Arco station. It's possible she filled up the rental car and the 2 gas cans. June 4th, the day Travis Alexander died. Jodi Arias arrives in Mesa, Arizona after traveling 1,000 miles. Arias gets to Alexander's house at 4 a.m. and they go to bed. Alexander now has less than 14 hours to live. At 1 p.m., Arias says they woke up, had sex, and took nude photos of each other. 5:22 p.m., Arias begins taking a series of 19 pictures of Alexander in the shower. 5:30 p.m., Arias' camera captures the last picture of Travis Alexander alive. At 5:32 p.m., there is a picture of Alexander bleeding and on the ground. It's possible to see what looks like Arias' leg and foot. 11 p.m., Arias makes 3 brief calls to Travis Alexander's phone. She leaves a voicemail. June 5th, West Jordan, Utah. Arias arrives at former boyfriend Ryan Burns' home around 10 a.m. Her hair is dark brown and there are cuts and bandages on her fingers. On the way to a business meeting with Burns, police stop Arias' rental car because her license plate is upside down. Police give her a warning. After the meeting, Arias and Burns return to his home where they, quote-unquote, make out. Arias leaves Burns' home after midnight. June 6th. Arias travels through Salt Lake City and into Nevada, making more gas and food purchases. June 7th. Redding, California. She returns her rental car at 1:08 p.m. The rental car agent testified the car appeared to have Kool-Aid stains on the passenger seat and the floor mats were gone. In all, she traveled more than 2,800 miles. A month later, Jodi Arias is arrested on July 15, 2008.
In the closing arguments, which began on May 4th, Jodi Arias' defense argued that the premeditation theory did not make sense. One of Jodi's attorneys, Jennifer Wilmot, argued, quote, "What happened in that moment in time? The relationship, a relationship of chaos, ended in chaos as well. There is nothing about what happened on June 4th in that bathroom that looks planned. Couldn't it also be that after everything they went through in that relationship, that Jodi simply snapped? Ultimately, if Miss Arias is guilty of any crime at all, it is the crime of manslaughter and nothing more." End quote. In rebuttal, prosecutor Juan Martinez described the extent and variety of Travis Alexander's wounds. Quote, "There is no evidence that he ever laid a hand on her, ever. Nothing indicates that this is anything less than a slaughter. There was no way to appease this woman who just wouldn't leave him alone." End quote. Jodi Arias' testimony added to a very long defense portion of the guilt phase of the trial, which led to problems with retention of jury members. On April 3rd, a member of the jury was dismissed for misconduct. The defense team asked for a mistrial, which the judge denied. On April 12th, another juror was excused for health reasons. A third juror was dismissed on April 25th after being arrested for a DUI offense. As of April 25th, defense costs had reached almost $1.7 million, paid by taxpayers. On May 7, 2013, after 15 hours of deliberation, Jodi Arias was found guilty of first-degree murder.
State of Arizona versus Jodi Ann Arias, verdict, count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn, in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant as to count 1, first-degree murder, guilty. 5 jurors find premeditated, 0 find felony murder, 7 find both premeditated and felony. Signed, foreperson. Is this your true verdict, so say you want it all?
Ladies and gentlemen, the clerk is now going to ask each of you a question. Please answer yes or no.
Juror number 1, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 2, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 3, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 4, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Of the 12 jurors, 5 found her guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, and 7 found her guilty of both first-degree premeditated murder and felony murder. As the guilty verdict was read, Travis Alexander's family smiled and hugged one another. People who had gathered outside the courtroom began cheering and chanting. And the scenes from outside the courtroom are wild. There are so many people there, and they're just celebrating. which has always just been kind of a weird thing to me when people celebrate the ill fate of others. I mean, I understand that they're angry about what Jodi had done. It's the same thing with like how tons of people gathered outside of Ted Bundy's execution to cheer it on and sell T-shirts about his death. It just always weirded me out. Like, I get that he was a monster, but isn't it kind of monstrous to be gathering and celebrating and like barbecuing and selling T-shirts outside of an execution? Not that this was exactly the same thing, but it's still sort of the same vibe. It just weirds me out that people are coming to celebrate this woman being found guilty. I don't know. That's just me. Now, it was Travis Alexander's family that were really pushing for the death penalty. In fact, the defense team had come to the prosecution a couple of times trying to work out plea agreements, but the family wouldn't accept a plea. They wanted the death penalty. And it's because of this that Jodi gets on the stand and reveals all the stuff about Travis possibly being attracted to children and having child porn and having anal sex with Jodi on the night that she converted to Mormonism while she was still in her ceremonial garb, whatever they call that outfit. And the phone sex tapes where he talks about how she sounds like a 12-year-old girl orgasming and how hot that is, and the messages where he calls her a three-holed wonder. And it's because Travis's family is pushing for the death penalty and the prosecutor is going after this that the defense team tells the prosecution, look, Jodi's going to go on the stand, and if the family's going to push for this, she's going to destroy Travis's character. She has some very explosive stuff that she's going to say when she gets up on that stand. And we don't think the family's prepared to hear it. Trust us, it's going to be huge. So maybe they should take the plea and then none of that stuff will come out or be heard. But no, the family of Travis Alexander did not care. They didn't think Jodi had anything believable that would be so damaging to Travis that it wasn't worth doing. So they wanted to go to trial and push for that death penalty. So yeah, all that stuff came out. And again, you can go watch the trial footage on YouTube and you'll see their faces when some of this stuff comes out or some of the claims Jodi makes comes out. And they do not look too comfortable. Now, I'm not sure if this is the right section to be talking about this. I was kind of going to do a closing thoughts section at the end, but because I've thought of this now, I just want to bring it up so I don't forget. A lot of people have talked about this case. It's hugely popular. You can find it all over the internet. People with different takes and different things to say about it. That's why this episode took me so long. I think there might be something to Jodi's claims about Travis Alexander's child porn stuff. I know most people think that it was bogus. She made this stuff up to make him look worse than he was. But hear me out here. First, he does say in the phone sex call that it's so hot that Jodi sounds like a 12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. That's something he said by choice and repeated. Just saying, he said that. Okay? Also, something that I don't think anyone's picked up on, or at least I haven't found anyone talking about this. When Travis and Jodi were taking photos with Travis's new camera just before she killed him, you know, the sexy photos, the nude photos they were taking together. In these photos, which are all online, Jodi has pigtails in her hair. Now look up Jodi Arias on Google and look at the images section. I don't think there's another picture in existence where Jodi has pigtails in. So the only time you see Jodi with pigtails, little braided pigtails like Pippi Longstocking, is in these sexy photos that she's taking with Travis when they're having sex. So was this to make her appear younger? Was this to make her appear like a little girl? Is that what Travis was into? I don't know. I just think it's interesting that we never see her with pigtails in any other situation. And, you know, that's a typical thing to try and make people look younger. There are whole genres of porn where they're trying to take 18-year-old girls and make them look younger than they are, and that's one of the things they do. They dress them in schoolgirl outfits, and they give them pigtails. When you're trying to make girls look younger, pigtails is like almost always one of the things they do. So I think that's interesting, that's the only time we see Jodi in pigtails. So maybe there is something to Travis being into little girls. If you've seen a picture where Jodi Arias is wearing pigtails, braided pigtails, or anything like that, where she's not naked, do send it to me. Do let me know. darkworldpod@gmail.com. Because if there are other photos where she's rocking pigtails, then I guess it kind of diminishes my theory a little bit, but just thought that was interesting. The penalty phase began on May 16th, 2013, when the prosecution called Travis Alexander's family members to offer victim impact statements in an effort to convince the jury that Arias' crime merited a death sentence. 5 days later, Jodi Arias offered an allocution, during which she pleaded for a life sentence. She acknowledged that her plea for life was a reversal of remarks she made to a TV reporter shortly after her conviction, when she said that she preferred the death penalty. She said, quote, "Each time I said that, I meant it, but I lacked perspective. Until very recently, I could not imagine standing before you and asking you to give me life." End quote. She said she changed her mind to avoid bringing more pain to members of her family who were in the courtroom. That evening, in a joint jailhouse interview with the Arizona Republic and NBC's Today Show, Jodi said that she did not know whether the jury would come back with life or death. She said, quote, "Whatever they come back with, I will have to deal with it. I have no other choice." End quote. Regarding the verdict, Jodi said, quote, "It felt like a huge sense of unreality. I felt betrayed, actually, by the jury. I was hoping they would see things for what they are. I felt really awful for my family and what they were thinking." End quote. On May 23rd, the sentencing phase of Jodi Arias' trial resulted in a hung jury, prompting the judge to declare a mistrial for that phase. The jury had reached an 8-4 decision in favor of the death penalty. After the jury was discharged, jury foreman William Zervakos stated that the jury found the responsibility of weighing the death sentence overwhelming, but were horrified when their efforts ended in a mistrial. Quote, "By the end of it, we were mentally and emotionally exhausted. I think we were horrified when we found out that they had actually called a mistrial, and we felt like we had failed." End quote. On May 30th, Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery discussed the next steps at a news conference. He said that he was confident an impartial jury could be seated, but it was possible that lawyers and the victim's family could agree to scrap the trial in favor of a life sentence with no parole. Jodi had said, quote, "I don't think there's an untainted jury pool anywhere in the world right now. That's what it feels like. But I still believe in the system to a degree, so we'll just go through that if that happens." End quote. Her attorneys added, quote, "If the diagnosis made by the state psychologist is correct, then the Maricopa County Attorney's Office is seeking to impose the death penalty upon a mentally ill woman who has no prior criminal history. It is not incumbent upon Ms. Arias' defense counsel to resolve this case." End quote. Finally, in October of 2014, Jodi Arias' sentencing retrial began. Opening statements were given, and a hearing on evidence was held. On March 5th of 2015, Judge Stevens declared a mistrial because the jurors, who deliberated for about 26 hours over 5 days, deadlocked at an 11-1 vote in favor of the death penalty. The 11 jurors in favor of the death penalty indicated that the sole holdout juror was sympathetic to Jodi Arias and had an agenda. Sentencing was scheduled for April 7th of 2015, with Judge Stevens having the option to sentence Arias to either life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, or with the possibility of parole after 25 years. On April 13th, 2015, Jodi Arias was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As of 2016, Jodi Arias is housed at the Arizona Department of Corrections number 281129, located at the Arizona State Prison Complex, which out here we simply refer to as Perryville. She started her sentence and remains in the complex's maximum security Lumley unit, but she has the possibility of being downgraded to the medium security level at some point during her sentence. All right, folks, so that is going to wrap up the Jodi Arias case. Boy, do I have a lot of thoughts about this one. There are so many different ways I could go with this, and here we are. This episode has already gone on for so long, but I do want to get a few thoughts in here because I feel like it would be a missed opportunity not to after spending all this time and just all the thoughts that came to me. I think I should get some of them out. First, let's go back to the book Lady Killers, which I quoted from at the beginning of the episode. It's a book by Tori Telfer, and the full title is Lady Killers, Deadly Women Throughout History. And I quote, "Being a lady killer is quite lonely, it turns out. Not a single woman in this book appears to have had any close friends. And as far as I can tell, the only people who really reached out to them, or tried to understand them, were pastors, journalists, and the occasional doctor or defense lawyer. In other words, people who were sent to them after they'd been locked up, when it was too late to save them from themselves." End quote. And that just strikes me as incredibly sad. I see a deep loneliness in Jodi Arias. I think it's really sad that she never really had any friends. And that's very telling. Like, her own family didn't even know her. No one spoke up for her on her behalf. Yes, her family came to her trial, but it's her family. They should be at her trial. And it just struck me as wild that she didn't have any real friends. No one to call a friend. And by all accounts, it was like this throughout her life, and I just find that really sad. So when I see all of the vitriol and people making fun of her online and calling her Hodi and talking about how she's just like the crazy stalker ex, it's just, I don't know. It just seems so short-sighted. Like, it doesn't quite capture what was really going on. Like, if you watch those interrogation videos, again, they're all available on YouTube. You see a hurt person. I know she does a lot of strange stuff and it's easy to poke fun at it, but to me, when I watch that, I see someone suffering from a massive anxiety disorder. It was probably untreated. I mean, I'm no doctor. I am not qualified to be, evaluating anyone or doing any sort of intake on Jodi Arias, but it seems to me, I just recognize a lot of those behaviors in myself. I suffer from anxiety, and some of her behaviors in that interrogation room that everyone liked to point to as someone acting crazy are really just things that anxious people do. And given her circumstances, that anxiety was cranked all the way to 10, I'm sure. Not to mention, it just gets kind of boring in those rooms, I imagine, too. Like, singing in the shower, singing in the interrogation room? Maybe not. But she obviously knew she was on camera. She sees the camera right there. She knows, anyone who even just watches crime stuff on TV knows that all these interrogation rooms have a video camera in there. So maybe it was some, intended weird stuff like the handstands and the singing songs and the weird posturing and getting under the table. Maybe all that stuff was calculated. That's another possibility. But it's either that or her anxieties needing some outlet, you know? I don't think it's that she's just a completely bizarre, crazy person, because by all accounts, she wasn't. In fact, everyone liked her at the beginning. And this totally tracks with stuff from earlier in her life, too. Like, if you don't have any friends and you're kind of trying to fit in at the age of 14, you know, when Jodi was caught growing marijuana on her parents' roof, it seems to me, I mean, she never had any friends. She had boyfriends, usually older. This totally seems like the kind of thing maybe an older boyfriend put her up to, or she just volunteered to do to try and be cool and fit in with some more dangerous older kids. And, you know, this early on, this started Jodi's lying. You know, her need to fit in, her need to protect her boyfriend or whoever it was. You know, I am speculating here, but I think that's relevant. I mean, that seems to make so much more sense than Jodi just suddenly deciding to grow marijuana on her parents' roof. I think it was probably some outside influence. And, you know, Jodi lies to hide that stuff and to keep her parents out of her private life. And so this starts a behavior throughout her life that lying is the first wall of defense. If you're going to get in trouble, if you're going to get caught for something, lie, deny, 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 lie, lie, lie. And that's what Jodi does initially. Even if she were being abused and she killed Travis in self-defense, her first instinct is still going to be to lie and try to get out from under the pressure of being in trouble, because that's what she knows. She doesn't have friends to fall back on. She doesn't have people in her life that she's close to. It's just Jodi against the world. And she's got to do what's best for Jodi to protect herself. So I think that's in play. Another thing I want to address is that you may have picked up on sort of an air or the vibe of this episode being maybe a little victim blamey. Like, I do come out against Travis a few times as being kind of a repugnant person, and that is by design. It's not that I'm trying to blame the victim. I don't think he deserved what happened to him. But I guess I'm just tired of seeing the same takes over and over about how Jodi is so crazy and look out for girls like her. You see, the crazy stalker X. That's a real thing. God, guys, dudes must love that Jodi Arias exists. They must love having this classic example to point to be like, oh, see, the crazy psycho vindictive ex-girlfriend thing is real. She'll come and kill you. Totally. My ex was like that too. And it's just really unfortunate because it's so rare. It almost never happens. And because it has happened here, people get to point to it, and I just find that kind of irritating. Especially because maybe she didn't just premeditatively murder him, you know? Listen, maybe she was lying. She probably was. She probably did just kill him because she wanted to. But I just think we can't be so quick to assume that, because so many women who kill their abusers legitimately in self-defense aren't believed either. They're called crazy too, and they're judged and persecuted too. So we just have to be careful. And, you know, if Jodi was one of them, if she was a legitimate abused woman who was killing her abuser for fear of her life, it's just unfortunate that she lied at first, because it just makes it that much harder to believe her. But we still have to allow for the possibility that she's telling the truth now. I'm not saying it's likely, but it's possible. And I just think it's unfortunate that, you know, Jodi says this herself. She says that society has a need to persecute people. And I think she's right about that. It's like, we want, as a society, we want to judge someone. We want to come out against someone. Like all the people who were outside her trial cheering, all the people at Ted Bundy's execution. We just need an excuse to make sure that it's okay. Oh, okay, she killed someone. Now I can judge her. Now I can be mean about her. If she hadn't done that, oh, then I can't do it. Dang. Really wish I could have judged her. Oh, now I have an excuse. Okay, she killed someone. Now I can judge her. It's just that kind of a thing. Did you guys notice in the 911 call when Travis's friends had discovered his dead body and then called 911? I played it at the top of the episode. Did you notice that only one of all of his friends seemed really upset at all? The rest of them were totally composed and just seemed sort of like it was a normal day, like a normal phone call. And I know people act differently in terms of, how they deal with trauma and stress. So I know we can't glean too much from that. But the one guy that was on the phone was totally shaken. You could tell. But all of the different girls that got on the phone just seemed totally relaxed and like it was no big deal at all. And it just struck me. I just wondered, maybe Travis really wasn't very close with a lot of people himself. Maybe he didn't have a lot of friends. He just had a lot of sort of surface level church connections. Maybe people just pretended to like him because they were drawn to his success and his, like Jodi was when she first met him at the Vegas retreat or speaking convention, whatever it was. Maybe the people in his life were sort of drawn to him as like an alpha type or whatever, but he didn't have any really close friendships. I just wonder if that may be. Maybe Travis was kind of a piece of shit. We certainly have seen some evidence of that. I wonder if he was sort of like that across the board. Maybe no one really liked him. Just a thought. I guess I just feel bad for Jodi. And maybe that's my own naivete. Maybe I'm falling for the, is she hot or not thing that Tori Telfer mentions in her book. When we become aware of a female killer, one of the first things we think of is, well, is she attractive or not? And, maybe to me, I want to defend Jodi because she seems more like a damsel in distress than a cold-blooded killer. And that's a problem too. That's something I have to be careful of. So I'll marinate on that for a while. This case has definitely given me a lot to think about. And I hope this episode has given you a lot to think about. I hope you enjoyed this episode 26 on Jodi Arias, and I hope it was worth the wait. Okay, that was a lot of hoping. Time to wrap this one up. Oh, but one last thing. You may have noticed that I cut in someone singing "Oh Holy Night," the Christmas carol, at the beginning of this episode and also in the teaser I did for this episode. And let me just explain that in case you don't know. That was one of the songs Jodi was singing in the interrogation room when she was left on her own. And years later, in prison, Jodi won a singing contest within the prison, and that was the song she sang. It's on YouTube also. You can look it up. But I just thought it created a nice sort of eerie ambiance, ironically, because of the subject matter of the episode. But maybe I'll lead you out with Jodi singing "Oh Holy Night." And I will be back in your ears again soon. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, Ed C. and I are going to be covering the case of Madeleine McCann. Look forward to that. I'll also be doing some more Doc Worlds. Jessica Boom and I already have one planned. So yeah, more stuff coming. I've got several narrative episodes that I've been prepping for you. So I think that's it for me, listeners. Please be safe. Please be kind. And please let me know what you thought of episode 26, Jodi Arias. Until next time, folks. See